Welcome back to the channel. My name is Adam Smith, and inside this video we dive headfirst into gameplay together for Grimcoven. This one coming from Awakened Realms. It's landing on GameFound for June 6th, so not far away from the release of this video. If you want to find the campaign page link, I've got you covered in the pinned comment, video description, and also it'll be on screen at the top right now. Now, for those of you that have not checked out my prototype unboxing or my how to set up video, I definitely recommend stopping this video, checking the link in the top right-hand corner right now, which will take you to that prototype unboxing and how to set up video. Check those out first and then come back here. And that's because it'll provide you a lot of context for what we're about to get ourselves into. And what we've gotten ourselves into is a battle against the Covergence, this monstrosity of a boss that's going to be throwing all kinds of craziness at us. And it won't just be the boss, there are minions throughout the scenario. We have 4 of them, and then we have an elite in the top left-hand corner. I have a correction to make from the how to set up video, which I did mention in the pinned comment and video description, but I'll do that change here right now, and that is the addition of a tornado into the scenario. This Covergence boss also has details around the tornado and how it's used right on its boss tile. So what are the win conditions for Grimcoven? Well, we need to get through this deck of cards. These boss attack cards, when they flip over and they go through the row here, they all have a certain value of health on them. We can make attacks against these to remove these cards from the boss. And as we remove the cards, we'll eventually get to a final card, which will have us do one more major attack worth of health damage, and that should be enough. Now, it sounds easy, but these bosses are anything but easy. Now, from the setup video, I went ahead and set up my Techromancer as a fully fledged character, but as I'm playing solo, I'm going to be using the Deputy Hunter, which is to the left. And this is a great streamlined way to play solo with an additional hunter without having to keep track of 2 full boards worth of information, and also not having to use dice whatsoever with the deputy side of the equation. So without further ado, let's dive straight into gameplay, and I'll take you through the very first round of gameplay at a slower pace to show you all the different ins and outs, and then we'll pick things up as we go along.
The ground around the shores of Leave is soft and spongy. Dark shapes float down the lazy current, barely visible under the surface of the murky water, slowly gliding toward the abyss of the ocean. Beyond the river, you see the Covergence. At first, it looks like a destructive force of nature that thrashes about the countryside. After watching it for a while with your bronze spyglass, you realize it's not roaming aimlessly. It's looking for something. Or someone. Other small entities are visible around the Covergence. Were they drawn to it? Do they worship it? What could they be looking for on this forsaken riverbank? You move forward, failing to notice small wisps of Lament that rise from your footprints like smoke.
So we'll kick off gameplay by taking a look at the reference card included in the prototype. Worth mentioning, the first 3 things on the Hunter's phase are completely ignored, so we're not going to move the first player token, the evolution step's not going to occur, and the corruption step is not going to occur. We're going to jump right to the refresh step. But the one thing I want to mention is we don't have to worry about a first player token at all anyway, because we're playing this thing solo. So we'll do the first thing, which is to refresh. Each hunter is going to refresh all their action dice, which means wherever they are, they're going to come back, and then we're going to roll the dice so that we have available dice. Now, available dice will sit to the left of your dashboard, which they actually currently are sitting there right now, but I haven't rolled them. So let's go ahead and do that roll and see what we get. Just like that, the Techromancer's dice have all been refreshed. You'll see a number of different icons along here, and you'll also see that one of them is a double icon. We'll talk more about that as we go along. Next step, we're going to go into the cleanse step. Each hunter can discard a number of specific gear symbols, I'm going to call these gears or cogs, to discard that many status tokens except for hunger. There's a condition called hunger, which you cannot at this point in time remove using that particular icon. So in this case, I don't have any conditions to worry about, so the cleanse step is nothing to me right now. The last step of the Hunter's phase is the most important. It's when Hunters take their turns. When there's multiple players around the game table, all the Hunters perform their turn using 2 actions. Then you repeat the step until no Hunter has any more actions to do. But when you're playing solo like I am with a fully fledged Technomancer character, and then off to the left, off screen, we have the Deputy Gunslinger. In this case, I can actually take actions interchangeably between the two whenever I want, however I want, so long as I have the actions to spend. So you might be wondering, well, how does that work exactly? Well, with the Technomancer, we're doing dice allocation using the available dice we have here to either slot on basic actions on our board here, or potentially use our actual weapon or armor slots on those cards to the right. And as the game goes on, you expand and you get your character upgraded, you're going to have more options and more dice if you've chosen to go that way, which you can as well, to add even more available options to slot stuff in later on. Now, on the Deputy Hunter side of the equation, what's really cool about using this in solo play is you don't have to manage dice whatsoever. You just get allocated a number of actions, which you then just put into place in order to accomplish whatever's going on with the deputy. So it's actually quite nice. It keeps the other characters streamlined when playing solo, which I truly appreciate. Now let's quickly talk about line of sight and range in this game, because being a boss battler, those are going to be pretty important things to understand and grasp from the very beginning, just in terms of strategically placing your characters in the right spots to accomplish what you're trying to do. So range is pretty straightforward. Basically, if you see something that says range 0, you need to be in the same space as that character. So for instance, if I have something that says range 0, then I need to be inside the same space as the minion in order to perform that. If I'm range 1, then I'm simply just 1 hex away. Now the other thing worth noting is that you can have up to 4 of these smaller models in this space. If you have any more than 4 in a space, if you move in, there is a chart in terms of priority order as to which individual you bump out of that space. The one thing to note is that bosses will never be a part of that priority order because they're so dang big, they're never going to be able to be pushed out of any space. So range is one factor for long shots, but line of sight really matters. And how line of sight is drawn in Grimcoven is you draw an imaginary line from the center of the model space to the center of another model space. So overall, pretty straightforward, what you might expect from most games out there. However, there is one thing to keep in mind. It's very key. The line can only be drawn through the middle of a given space edge. And if the line is interrupted by a blocking space, the line of sight cannot be drawn. So the key thing to remember is the line can only be drawn through the middle of a given space edge. And the middle of a space edge is if you take this individual and want to make a range 2 shot against this minion over here, you'd know it's within range 2, but in terms of line of sight, you draw from the middle of this hex and you draw to the edge and you'd hit a point. You actually wouldn't be in the middle of a space edge, which would be here, or here, or here, or here, or here, or here. So essentially, if you have a range 1 shot, you're able to actually shoot from range and you have line of sight to all 6 around you. Once you start getting to 2 out and beyond, you actually start finding small pockets where line of sight doesn't actually get to. So for example, if I had a range 0 to 2 shot, what kind of hexes could I impact? Well, of course, I can impact the one I'm standing in. I could also hit every single one of them around me because line of sight can be drawn from the center along the middle of the space edge into the hex in the center, no problem. But if you're going to range 2, then I'd only be able to draw a line in the middle of a space edge going this way for 2, this way for 1 because I can't go any further, this way for 2, this way for 1, this way for 1, and this way for 1. That's really all there is to line of sight, so pretty straightforward overall. And of course, you can't draw line of sight through a gigantic terrain piece like this, as it states even in the scenario setup. And these spaces right here, you cannot draw through these empty ones as well. Now there's one more change to this scenario setup, which I'm going to make right now, and it's something you get to do as players, or if you're playing solo, just myself. In this case, I get to place one more portal anywhere I wish. And the reason I waited until now to do this is because I wanted you to have an understanding of how line of sight and range works in the game. So now that you understand it, let's place the portal, hopefully in a spot that's going to give us the best benefit. I decided to place the portal behind the elite, not just because I can get a jump on the elite, but mainly because it's really far away, and that might give me the distance I need to stay safe from the ranged attacks coming from the boss and other individuals. Now, I can see on the boss board 2 cards are revealed right now. You guys saw them during setup, so I already have a heads up as to what the boss wants to do during this turn and the next turn. And as you can clearly see, there's some pretty nasty things on these 2 cards. So now with those explanations out of the way, we can certainly get deep into the Hunter's turn and start taking some actions. During this Hunter's turn, rather than explaining all the potential options I have in terms of dice allocation, I'll just start playing and I'll explain things as I go. I'm going to choose my first die here to use in the tactic slot, which is going to give me a tactic token. I'm going to use that tactic token immediately to reroll one of my blue dies. And the reason I want to do this is I'm trying to get 2 shields. When a tactic token is discarded, you can reroll any number of dice from your available pool. So I'm going to specifically do it for this one here because I want to keep the shield symbol as it's working myself towards a really good result over here. And again, you can stack dice with 2 individual shield icons in order to pay for this cost right here. And I'm trying to get this effect right here. I already have this gear symbol. I have 1 shield. I need another shield. So this is the one I'm going to try to reroll to get it. Let's see if it goes my way. No, it did not. It was worth a shot, but basically the mindset behind that strategy was that if I could have gotten what I needed, I could have placed 2 shield symbols on this spot, even stacked. And if I got a double shield symbol, I would have been great in that case, as there were some on the blue die as well. I just didn't get it. The gear symbol, if I pay these 2, then I gain 4 defense for myself, and any ally in range 0-1 gains 2 defense. So it would have been a nice 2-for-1 situation, but I missed out. So instead, let's go the long way around. I'm going to use this die here in my assist slot, and I'm going to give the ability for the gunslinger to have an additional token to use on the turn. So we're going to go like this. Now, typically, if you're playing with a fully fledged other hunter, then what would happen is whatever icon is here, when you place this die inside of here, is what's given as the icon for the colored marker you've given to the other player. But because I'm playing with a deputy hunter, they're only using these tokens anyway. It doesn't matter what the icon is. Everything's generic. Here are the 2 action tokens I'll be spending typically for the gunslinger on that hunter's turn, but the assist from the technomancer gives an additional 1. The gunslinger is going to go ahead and take 2 actions back to back. The first one's going to be to sprint. The primary reason I'm going to be doing that first is because I want to get through the portal that's right beside me. In order to get through a portal, to get to another portal, you have to sprint. You cannot move through a portal. In other words, you need to be moving thematically so fast that you suck through the portal and to another one. So the gunslinger is going to pop through this portal here and is going to end up in the top right-hand corner as part of my plan. Now my sprint for the gunslinger gives me 2 because right on the gunslinger's card on my dashboard it shows 2 movement generically, but a sprint gives you a +1 to that, meaning I have 3 movement. When I move through the portal it counts as 1. I have 2 more to spend if I wish. However, I have a plan because I really want to go ahead and shoot this particular minion, which is 2 spaces away, which is in line of sight and also within range. Based on the abilities that I have, I can shoot 2 to 4 spaces away so long as I'm drawing line of sight through the side of a space right in the middle it has to go through. So this is a legal line of sight and within range. So the other token I placed on my playmat just moments ago for the gunslinger is to deal single damage, range 2 to 4, and in line of sight. And 1 damage is all you need to take out the minion. So just like that, we've cleared that upper right-hand corner. I am kind of dangerously close next to a tornado. We'll talk more about how that has impacts, but I'm even more so looking at the boss. I'm trying to keep myself as far away from the boss during this particular turn because it is going to be doing, as we can see earlier from a previous shot I had, the Hurricane Vortex. And that's a thing that if you're close to the boss is going to hurt you. Being further away is better. Now, it just so happens I'm burning through all the actions here with my gunslinger, but again, as I've noted multiple times, you can bounce between the technomancer and the gunslinger however you wish. Just works out strategy-wise that the gunslinger might as well resolve everything right away. So next up, I'm going to go ahead and use the assist marker from the technomancer to give 2 shields to the gunslinger. And when I say 2 shields, I actually mean 2 defense, because that's what that actually is. So it's been slotted into the bottom right-hand corner of the board. Now, it's worth mentioning some of these environment cards can trigger different times during gameplay. Good idea to take a read through them and be sure of when they're supposed to trigger. Maybe make a note off to the side. But we have the Rushing River up top here. The card states at the end of each hunter's turn. So in this case, the gunslinger at this point would be done and would pass, not having anything else left to do. So at this point, the actual river would move. And the Rushing River tells us that everything, whether it be hunters or enemies on the river, are going to move down south. It's always a good idea to look at the environment cards around the game board and get accustomed to when they actually trigger. Some are just kind of ongoing effects that only resolve when you interact with them, but the Rushing River, for instance, has a trigger that says at the end of each hunter's turn, something's going to happen on the river. So being that we're completely at actions for the Deputy Hunter, that means that particular hunter's turn is done. It'll just be going to the Technomancer going forward for this round. So the Rushing River triggers that environment card, and that means everything on the river, enemies and hunters, are going to move 1 position south. So the tornado is rushing down the river, and we head over to the Technomancer for the rest of the actions left over. Now, a couple things worth mentioning around the Technomancer is he has an ability down here that says during your turn, you may discard one of the gear symbol icons off that die there to move one space. So not only do I have regular movement, which always gives me the movement value, but sprint, again, gives me this value +1 and allows me to go through portals. But this ability of discarding this die gives me an additional 1 move. That one is specifically just moving of 1 space, but that technically gives me 3 ways to move during my turn. Each of the hunters inside the game have different ways that they actually work in terms of the cards that you use. So in this case, for the Technomancer, you'll see these gear symbols at the bottom of the cards. These are going to, once a gear symbol die is placed in this slot, whatever's connected below it is going to trigger during the phase. So it's actually going to be something that can potentially boost things, make things more powerful. We'll talk more about that later on, but essentially as we get more cards from the Hunter Evolution deck, they will connect either to this path or to this path as we go through. I'm going to make one quick change here as I forgot to actually keep this die specific to the sprint action that I want to take. I can use any generic die for this one, so I'll choose to use this one instead. It should have done that. We're going to continue on here. So the next thing I want to do is sprint. That was part of my plan, so we're going to go ahead and do that. It has to match the icon inside, and that'll take me through the portal and give me 3 movement. Technomancer's going into the portal on the right-hand side and coming out on the left-hand side at the bottom. On my Tesla staff, which is my orange weapon card, I have a dice slot that says I can use this particular die that I rolled earlier, which is the double dagger symbol, in order to deal 1 damage at range 0 to 2, which is perfect. I can shoot, I'm in range and line of sight of that minion to the right. Now, it's very important to mention that as I'm killing off these minions, they're not providing me any Lament. Lament is these things right here, which I can land at the end of a movement in those spaces. I can collect those Lament to help me upgrade my character over time, but I'm also corrupting my character at the same time, so it's a wonderful balance. But every other enemy besides minions has Lament attached to them and will provide it to you through gameplay. The minions are simply just in the way and causing you grief. Last but not least, let's use the final die here in order to slot it into my armor card, and I'm going to be able to gain 2 armor. That's going to wrap up the Technomancer's turn. No more available actions to spend, which means the rushing river is going to trigger. The tornado's moving 1 more space further south along that river. The boss is technically in the river at the furthest south location of the river, so it can't go any further down anyway. The tornado churns down through the river, and we're going to be heading into the enemy phase. Now, as we move into the Hunter's phase, there was one thing that didn't happen but might happen in the future, and that is conditions or statuses within the game might reference the words at the beginning of your round, and those are effects or conditions. Those things trigger right before the Hunter's turns. In this case, we didn't have anything, but you might have some kind of status or condition effect on your board for your Hunters that would trigger before their turns happen. We head into our very first enemy phase, and the nice thing about this game is with these standees, it just makes flowing through everything and remembering what to do next that much easier. Of course, once you become accustomed to all this, you may not need the standees and can put them back in the game box, but I like them for reminding myself what I need to move through. The first thing is the event deck. If there is a revealed event, you go ahead and deal with that event at this time. If there isn't a revealed event, you do nothing right now. So step 1 on the very first turn is a breeze. You'll see how event cards come into play later on. We move on to step 2, which is the minions. We simply look at the card. You'll see 2 bullet points on that card. Every minion's going to have a different layout. We go top to bottom, and we resolve the first applicable bullet point we can pull off. There are currently 2 minions in play. One is behind this terrain piece over here. The other is behind the boss right here. So the one behind the boss is going to be far out of range. We'll talk about that in a second. Let's deal with the one further up north because it actually is within 3 range, which is going to trigger the very top thing, which was charge. If there's a hunter in range 0 to 3, move 3 spaces, attack in range 0 with 2 white dice. So the minion comes barreling into the gunslinger's space. We're rolling 2 dice to determine what happens. So you'll see at the very bottom of the card, it tells us specific symbols are going to do certain things. We have this first symbol, which will deal us a burn, and the one below it, which is that scratch icon, is going to deal us a damage. So here's hoping we avoid all of those. These are the dice we're rolling. They're big, and they definitely have a lot of those symbols that are being talked about on this card here. The only one that actually isn't present for this particular minion is this one. So we want to roll that one more so than anything else. Let's see how we do. I bet you it's not going to happen, though. We got ourselves 2 of these, which is going to be 2 burns. So unfortunately, the gunslinger gets 2 burn status tokens going into this wound and status area here. And it's actually kind of ironic because we just talked about when these things actually trigger. Burn is one of those things that triggers right before the hunter's turn. And what it does is if you have these burn conditions on you, they're going to provide you with damage or wounds. So essentially, you're going to get 2 hits of damage going into the next hunter's phase if you haven't dealt with these conditions. So not good. Now, the other thing you might be wondering is, well, wait a minute, don't you have defense down here? Couldn't you use it? No, you can't use defense against actual conditions or statuses. You'll have to use cleansing or different cleanse steps in order to try to resolve these different conditions that you get. Now, the other thing that's interesting to note, like let's say that we actually got some damage there. Let's say the other result happened, which was a scratch icon, and we got 2 scratches or 2 damage. Then we could have gone ahead and discarded this token to not take anything whatsoever. We can also, if we know we have multiple attacks coming through this enemy phase, choose not to use a defensive token at the point in time and use it for another attack coming at us later on, because we know that one might be more vicious and the token might be more valuable later on. So for instance, let's say a minion attacked you and it was coming at you for 1 damage. You might not want to discard a 2 defense token for a 1 damage hit. You might go, well, the elite's right behind it and it's going to hit me for 3. I'd rather use it on that one and take away 2 of those coming at me. So when you have a defensive token like this, you can choose to use it when you wish. The thing to note as well is that if you happen to gain another 2 shields when you already have 2 shields in here, they do not stack. So you're not going to be able to just magically create a 4 defense token from stacking 2 2s. You have to actually gain a 4 defense token in order to exchange the 2 that's in here to a 4. Now I've moved the boss off his position right here in order so we can see the other minion, because even though the other minion is not within 3 range of any hunter, there's another thing on the minion card that's going to happen for those minions, and that's going to be to bulk up. They're going to gain 2 defense. Their max is 1 token on them, so they're going to get 2 defense, and they're going to move 3 spaces towards the nearest hunter and try to attack in range of 0 to 1 with 1 white die if they can pull it off. Now, something that's really cool with the prototype, but it doesn't functionally work with the prototype at this moment, but in the final version, that's the aim, is that they do have a slot on the side of the miniature for housing specifically defensive tokens on the enemies, which is actually quite awesome, so that you don't have to manage all of the tokens on the game board. They'll just move with the actual miniature. So currently the Gunslinger is actually closer by 1 space than my Technomancer. Technomancer is 6 spaces away, my Gunslinger is 5, so this thing is moving 3 spaces towards my Gunslinger. And as we have this space right here and it's equal distance on the left or right side of it, I'm going to choose that the minion goes straight through the rushing river, so it makes it a little tougher for it to get all the way up. The great news is that minion needs to be in 0 to 1 range to make an attack, and so it is not. It does not get to make an attack against the Gunslinger. For the minions, the mindset on the card is essentially you have to resolve the top one fully in order to have it happen. Otherwise, you do the other option. In this case, the bulk up was the other option, so you do as much of it as you possibly can when you activate it. In this case, it got its shields, but it wasn't able to pull off the attack. We're not out of the woods yet on the enemy phase. We still have the Step 3 Elite coming at us now. This activation says, again, similar to the Minion, resolving the first applicable of these 2 bullet points here. So the first one is the Flaming Bomb Throw. If there is a hunter in range 0 to 3 and in line of sight, the in line of sight is key. Remember, we talked about that earlier as to how that's actually drawn. This one says attack all hunters in range 0 to 3 and in line of sight with 1 white die. So you can see the Elite in the top left-hand corner is in range 3. If we're counting just the hexes to get to my Technomancer, it is definitely 3 range, but line of sight-wise, we always have to draw from the middle of its space to the middle of my space through the center, and it has to go through the middle of one of the edges of the hex, which means it's not going to make it in terms of line of sight, which means that Flaming Bomb Throw isn't going to happen. Again, I positioned myself in a way to make sure that this was not going to occur. Unfortunately, I'm not perfectly safe, though, because there's a second thing that can happen if that first one can't resolve, and that's the running up bomb throw. So it's going to move towards me, attacking all hunters in range 0 to 2, which is part of the reason why I split up here, because I knew if I put both through the portal, that would be bad for both individuals. And as long as I'm in range and line of sight, which at this point definitely am, you can draw a line from its space to my space through the side of one of the hexes, no problem, without going through any points on the hex. That means we're going to be rolling 1 white die, and hopefully it's not going to be too bad. Now, what's really nasty about the Elite and a real focus for us to try and take out is because everything it rolls on this die is bad. So this is going to not be good for me. We're really going to want to focus on trying to take the Elite out now that it's gotten a little bit closer. And it's going to take a while to do so. We got to get 7 damage on this thing to take it out. And then we can gain with all characters, with an Elite, all characters would gain 3 Lament. So it's a huge boost for everybody if we take it out too. Let's see what we get here for the roll. We just got ourselves a scratch. Is that too bad? We're dealing 2 damage. And if any damage was dealt this way, you deal 3 burn. Well, guess what I did strategically? I made sure I got some armor on my character, and it's exactly what I need because I was keeping an eye on the elite card and the minion card and the boss cards to make sure I could strategically avoid taking big time hits off the start. So we're going to go ahead and use this shield to stop the 2 damage I would have gotten, and because no damage was dealt, no burns come through either. Alright, so far so good. We have a couple burns on the gunslinger, but overall we're doing decent for the health side of the equation. We go into now the boss attack, step number 4, and this is going to simply have us resolving each effect from the boss attack card in order, regardless if the effect can be resolved fully or not. This is why the boss is nasty. This Hurricane Vortex, the first bullet point states to move each hunter in range 0 to 3 from the boss or even from a tornado 2 spaces towards the boss. So first off, we're not 0 to 3 spaces from the boss. Are we 0 to 3 spaces from a tornado? Well, this one over here, the Technomancer, is not. So he is okay over there. But we do have a yes when it comes to the tornado on the right-hand side of the board. The Gunslinger is within 3. Now, if you count on either side of this empty space here leading to the Gunslinger can technically go to the left or to the right. In this case, I get a choice as to which way we're being pulled. So I've decided based on my strategy to actually pull myself down towards the tornado, which puts me right in the same space as the tornado and also a minion. Nothing's going to hurt me right now, but this gets me in position to potentially take out that minion in the future while still being in range and line of sight of the minion back at the other portal. So we might be able to get some interesting stuff going on there. And also it allows me to get closer to the elite to provide backup to my Technomancer on the far left. Now the boss isn't done with me next. This is pretty nasty. It says to deal 7 damage to each hunter on the map. So it's talking about both of my hunters in this case, but we get to reduce it by 1 damage for each space between the boss and that hunter. Now in terms of how you define between, it could literally be between, which is how I'm going to play it. In other words, the actual spaces in between the 2 miniatures, not counting the spaces that they're in. It might also be interpreted by some people as being, well, from the boss here, you're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 spaces away from the boss. But the way the card is written, it says between the 2. So that's going to be 5 here. And over here for this Gunslinger, 1, 2, 3. The Gunslinger does have a 2 defense token, which it will use to add into the 3 that it's being reduced by. So that's 5 being covered that way, which means 2 gets through onto the Gunslinger in terms of actual damage. The Technomancer doesn't have any defense left at all, so it gets 2 damage as well. So here's where we stand currently. We have 2 damage and 2 burns over here with the Gunslinger and 2 damage on the Technomancer. To wrap up the boss attack, at this point we discard the boss attack card from the this turn slot, which is the one we just resolved. Then we progress the boss attack track, so basically the one to the left, which is the Dust Devil, will move to the right, and we'll flip over a new boss attack card, which will populate the next turn slot. So the card we just went through, the Hurricane Vortex, is now moved over to the discard pile. Make sure to keep a discard pile to the right of this board. If you have any cards you've actually killed off, in other words, you put enough damage on that body part to take it out, that card needs to be eliminated from play. Do not get your elimination pile of the boss cards mixed up with your discarded cards, because eventually discarded cards will go back into the deck over here. They're only gone once they're eliminated and taken out through actual damage. Now, something else to keep in mind is that underneath of this turn slot, if I was to, let's say in the next round of play during the Hunter's phase, I actually got 8 damage and took this card out, there would be another card underneath, which is a much more minor attack called the Wind Razor that would still take effect. So it's always got some type of attack coming at you, even if you can do a decent amount of damage to wipe out its nastier effect based on its body part. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is anything that's revealed boss-wise, you can hit. So you can actually start hitting this one back here, knowing full well that putting 7 damage on something when our characters are very low on the damage equation right now, we can't do a ton of damage. So it might make sense to be targeting this space first as it works its way down the bench and it gets to here. We can put the extra damage we need hopefully on it at the right time to take it out. We're also going to need to try and focus on getting Lament pumped up as quick as possible to give us better options for more damage. Now, every boss has different gameplay, and this one's very cool in terms of its time track. Up here at the very top, you'll see it even spins in a vortex, that you're going to be actually be moving this token around, and it's going to activate either a new event, activating tornadoes, spawning minions, and a new stage card coming off of here. Again, it starts in the middle position, just like a tornado would, the eye of the tornado, and goes around the outside. So, new event is the very first thing that happens. So, even though it mentions tornado down here, this does not matter until we actually start activating the tornadoes. Right now, we get our first event card. So I've drawn and revealed a new event card, which I've just placed on top. You can also place it to the side of the deck if you wish. If there's an immediate effect on the card, the keywords will literally state immediate effect or resolve immediately right on the card itself, then do that thing. Otherwise, in this case, we don't have that. We have Hurtful Desire that has something going on, but it will not trigger in this moment when we drew this card. But this event effect will come into play during each event step until it does get discarded. All right, my friends, at this point, we've gone through a full round of gameplay, so things should begin to be clicking for you as to how things work here. And of course, as we go on, I'll start to drop off explanations on the things we've already discussed and just focus on the new things that we run into. In this case, we don't have any Lament to put into either the corruption track, so it does not matter. We'll keep on moving. We're heading to the corruption step for the very first time. This says each hunter draws and resolves one corruption card. We'll start with the Technomancer. I've drawn a corruption card. It says check your corruption level and resolve the effect. Well, my corruption level right now is definitely 0, so it says to reshuffle the deck. After shuffling, the Gunslinger got this card here, which we're not even on that benchmark because we're currently at 0, so good news. We don't take anything on that front. Now, what is the Corruption deck doing overall? Well, it's one of those fun situations where you're constantly gaining Lament to upgrade your character to make it more powerful to try to take out enemies, but at the same time, you're taking Corruption while doing so, and that Corruption has a cost, and this Corruption deck will come back to bite you as you continue to climb up the track, getting stronger as a character, but of course, corrupting yourself as you go. Once you hit this middle position right here that is the most brightest on the track, that is going to have you flipping over. Your hunter is going to go from a regular state of being just a gunslinger to a corrupted gunslinger, and things and stats will change. The refresh step, very straightforward. Everything's coming off the gunslinger that was used, and of course this one's going to go back into the assist position for my Technomancer, and all my dice are going to come back to the available pool, and we're going to roll them. Let's go ahead and roll the dice and see how we do in terms of icons. We now head to the cleanse step, and this only affects fully fledged characters with dice, because in this step you need a specific icon on the die in order to do a cleanse. You have to have this icon here, which I don't have a purple die yet in my fray, but you can still find it on other dice that you might already have. But the purple one has the most iterations of that particular symbol, so if you want to get something that helps you with cleanse, you're going to want to get this die into your pool maybe earlier than you'd expect. And this is bad news for the Deputy Hunter, because if you take a look at the different effects here, this one for burn says at the beginning of your round. And as we talked about before, those are going to trigger just before the Hunter's turn, which unfortunately is right after the cleanse step. So right now, the burns that I have here on this Hunter are going to provide me 2 more wounds or damage. So at this point, we have 4 damage on the Deputy with 12 total health. My first die I'm going to use is going to be a sprint die. I actually have 2 of them, so I'm safe to use one here for a regular move, and we're going to use it in order to just move from here to grab that Lament. The Lament is now on the Technomancer's board, and I'm going to go ahead and use another sprint die in order to go through the portal. I had the Technomancer go all the way to the top right, came out of the portal, and move 1 space over. Now I'm going to go ahead and make a shot. Here's how things look on the board. The first die I used was a sprint die, which would have been handy for this spot, but I only need 1 because only 1 can be used. You cannot stack these like this, so I placed it in the move. That gave me 2 movement based on this, and I only needed 1 to go grab that Lament, which I placed right here. Next up, we used an actual sprint to get through the portal and out the other portal that I just showed you moments ago, and now we're going to go ahead and make an attack. And this one over here has 2 daggers. You can deal 1 damage in range 0 to 2, so this works. We are definitely in range, and we are able to make this attack. So these 2 are going to be stacked on top of each other. That was not that result, and we're going to go ahead and place them right here and take that shot, and that minion's going to die. The Technomancer takes out the minion right next to him. Now I have 1 more die remaining, and I could shield myself up, but you know what? I'm pretty far from the action. I think I'm relatively safe. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to give this as an assist to my other character. So it's going to give that additional action token, universal marker, to the Deputy. With the Technomancer's turn done, that's going to force the Rushing River to trigger, moving everything on it down 1 space. So now all my actions left available are on the Gunslinger. Just so happens that is the case this time around. Again, remember, strategically, you can bounce back and forth between the different hunters, and the Rushing River is only going to trigger when one of the hunter's turns are done. So you can use that to your advantage strategically, although it actually worked out pretty good for me right now because it pushed my characters down the river, so the Gunslinger is actually closer to a portal and also closer to the boss, which I think works for me. So I use 1 marker for a move, which generates me 2 movement. I moved right beside the boss. Being next to the boss, this sounds like a good one to use. Deal 2 damage at range 1 and in line of sight. Now this is where things get interesting, because when you deal 2 or more damage to a card that is face up in this turn slot or the next turn slot, you can actually stop those focused triggers from happening. So as long as you got 2 or more damage on the card, when it comes around to resolve the card, the focused abilities will not trigger. And this is huge for me because, as you can see, the Dust Devil is going to be a really nasty one that has this boss moving 2 spaces, then another 2 spaces, and then a guaranteed 2 spaces, which means this thing's going to move from where it is and get right close to as many of the hunters as possible, and it's going to go ahead and chuck some serious dice at us, 3, and we don't want that to happen, so I'm throwing my damage here on the Dust Devil. Now the nasty thing about putting the damage on the one that is into this turn slot is that after we resolve this card, the damage will disappear, so you're not working towards actually taking the card out on this given turn. As I've already burnt all my actions with the Technomancer, you're kind of strategically trying to buy your time here. I could have placed these 2 over here and taken an absolute nasty thrashing from the boss with this card, but I've chosen this time to basically burn my damage to keep myself healthy. Last action marker for the Gunslinger will be to use Sprint, and I'm going to go right through the portal on the right. The Gunslinger will emerge from the portal in the top right. With another hunter's turn done, the enemy hunters on the river will move 1, which is great news for me, because that actually puts the minion with the defense token on it just out of position from being able to hurt me in the future. Enemy phase begins. Event is the first one, and we do have an event which is face up. This one says Hurtful Desire. Each hunter in range 0 to 1 from a Lament space gains 1 unblockable damage. Well, guess what? We are far away from those. Next up is Minions, and we only have 1 left currently. This one says Charge. If there is a hunter in range 0 to 3, then move 3 spaces, attack. That is not going to happen. No hunters in range 3. Next up is Bulk Up, and it can only gain at max a 2 armor. It already has it, so it's not going to get that. It's going to move 3 spaces, though, and attack in range 0 to 1 with 1 die. The minion was in the tornado space, moves 3 spaces up to the nearest hunter, and it's going to go ahead and make an attack against the Gunslinger. Let's see how it goes. And that, unfortunately, is going to be another shot of damage to the Gunslinger. The Alchemist Elite is going to go next, and the top one definitely can't happen. There's nobody within 0 to 3 range. Next one here says, Run Up Bomb Throw. Move 2, attack all hunters in range 0 2, and line of sight with a single white die. The Alchemist looks for the nearest hunter, which in this case is either 7 spaces away or 6 spaces away, whether you're talking about the south path around or the north path above, and it's going to be taking the north path. The good news is there's nobody within range 0 to 2 and line of sight, so there's going to be no damage happening whatsoever from the Elite. Boss activation time. We take a look at this turn card. It says Dust Devil, focused and focused. Normally these would trigger, but because we have at least 2 damage on the card, they will not. But the guaranteed movement one underneath is going to move 2 spaces, so we'll go ahead and do that. After that, it's going to do something around attacking. It says it's going to attack each hunter in range of 0 to 1 from the boss with 3, which would have been absolutely devastating. Thankfully, we're nowhere near that. And as per normal, we cycle cards down the row. You can see the arrows that depict how things move all the way through, and we have a new card coming in. The time track is next, and it's going to be activating of all tornadoes. There's currently 1 on the board. It says activation, resolve first applicable. So it says if any hunter's in range 0 to 1, attack that hunter with 3 white dice. That is the reason why I got my hunters as far away from the tornado as possible. So no issues there. The next one says if any hunter is in range 2 plus, move the tornado twice. So the tornado is locking onto the nearest hunter. In this case, it's the Gunslinger. It's moving 2. In a way, the river's being really beneficial for us because we can use this in order to get these things to kind of flow further south away from us. We head on to the next round, and at this point we're in the evolution step, so we can choose to place, if we wish, on a fully fledged character, any Lament we have here on the board into the corruption track. If we do, that's of course going to move things along. So we don't actually have to do it right now, and I'm actually going to choose not to, because when we pull the corruption deck cards, it might keep me away from something nasty happening, and there's no benefit until I can know that I can at least unlock something. One thing to note about the evolution step, when you check your deputy, if you have any Lament whatsoever on the deputy, it has to go in the corruption track. Unlike the fully fledged characters where you can choose to put it in or not, this one you have to put it in. So nothing to do in the evolution step. Let's move on to the corruption deck and see what we have. In this case, we're A-OK. We don't fall into any of these ranges. Both characters have been refreshed. Let's roll our dice for the Technomancer and see what we get. I'm really looking forward to getting to this first unlock, so hopefully we get 1 more Lament. That'll be a goal here for the Technomancer. Something we need to focus on during this turn is the Gunslinger's burn conditions, which are slowly impacting his health overall. I'm going to go ahead right out of the gates here, and we're going to cleanse. We're going to get rid of both those burn tokens. It's important to note the cleanse action that is on the deputy board as well as the technomancer board, both for 1 die will cleanse away up to 2 conditions or statuses. I'm going to go ahead and use another assist action here. So in order to do that, Technomancer is spending a die here to give this token over to the Gunslinger. So we have an additional one to use. I'm going to choose to sprint right through the portal and get very, very close to the boss. Gunslinger is sprinting through the portal and coming out the one on the right-hand side. The Gunslinger goes through the portal and gets within range 1 to do a 2 damage attack against the boss. Now I could go ahead and place this on the Maelstrom card to stop a focused ability that's going to happen later on where it's going to attack each hunter on the map with an additional white die, but I'd rather start working towards maybe taking out a card. Let's see if we can do it. The deputy's turn is done and the tornado and the minion are going to move down the river. And this doesn't bode well for the future because that minion is now 3 spaces away from my Gunslinger. My Technomancer is going to go ahead and spend a die in order to sprint to get through the portal and get on one of the Lament tokens. And while in range 0 to 2 is going to deal 1 damage to the boss. Let's do this on the game board. The damage on the boss is also going to go in the Hurricane Vortex. We have 3 on that card. We need 7 to take it out. With my last die, I'm going to go ahead and take a Tactic token. Now, unfortunately, making this aggressive move towards the boss to put some damage on it is going to come at a cost because the event card is going to hurt somebody. It's going to be the Gunslinger taking a damage because it is next to one of the Lament spaces. That's not good news because we currently have 8 damage on this deputy and we need to get some healing going. Next up we have the minions, and there is actually a minion within 3 range away from my Technomancer, so it's going to do a charge and then it's going to do a range 0 attack with 2 white dice. There's always a cost in this game for making aggressive moves, but you have to pick your windows. And my mistake, I said Technomancer, I meant Gunslinger. So Gunslinger's getting picked on right now, and we've got 2 dice being thrown. This is not good. So here we go. Let's find out what happens. I'm not looking forward to this. We got ourselves one of each of those icons, both of which are on the card. So that's a burn and a damage. For the time being, we've been staying away from the elites, but there is strategy in taking this thing out as early on as possible, which I'd love to do, but there's lots to manage. This individual is going to go ahead and can it do the flaming bomb throw? No, it cannot. It's going to do the run-up bomb throw, so it's going to move 2, attack all hunters in range 0 to 2, which we know that attack won't happen, but it is going to move. He's way up there in the top left. He's shuffling his way over towards the river. So the action is certainly headed towards the right-hand side of the game board. Now this could be bad. So currently right now on the Gunslinger, I have 6, 7, 8, 9 damage. I have 12 total health. I have only 2 damage on the Technomancer. Going into this, the nasty card here says, depending on the range from the boss, attack each hunter with a specific die. So I got my guys close in to do attacks for this card, specifically because this one is going to be nastier for further away. So it worked out to kind of run in there and do big attacks for this card, being that we're not going to take as much from the dice, but we still have to roll a die for each of them. And unfortunately, as you saw just below that, there's a focused ability. Because we didn't put 2 damage on that card, we'll be rolling an additional attack against each hunter with additional die. So basically, both hunters are taking 2 white dice apiece. So let's go ahead and find out what happens. We'll first do the Gunslinger and cross our fingers, because this could be the end. Let's see how it goes. We got ourselves... Oh, we might be... it's interesting. And it's not good news, my friend, because the Deputy Gunslinger is taking, based on these 2 symbols, 3 damage and a burn and 2 damage. So 5 damage and a burn. So long story short, we maxed out our health. We have 12 damage on the character. We also have 2 burn effects on the character, which are not good. And then we're going to take a look at the secret card number 1. It says, if you have a critical injury token on your hunter board, you die, scenario failed. We don't have the critical token on the deputy board yet, although I'm not sure if I was supposed to set one, as the particular game rules don't specify that specifically. I'll have to double check. And then it says, otherwise, place a critical injury token on your hunter board, heal 1, and discard all your status tokens. Okay, so we're going to get rid of the 2 burn tokens, and we're going to come back with 11 damage on us. The only other good news in this situation is we don't have to draw a corruption card, although it's not going to matter much because we don't have any corruption currently. And the other thing is that any other attacks are going to ignore the Gunslinger for this particular round. Not out of the woods yet, as I still have to roll my 2 dice for the Technomancer now, and both of my characters don't have defense this time around, so pretty bad. 1 die rolled off screen, pulled it back in. We got 2 of the nasty scratches, which mean 4 damage come to the Technomancer for a total of 6 on the board. That was a pretty brutal boss turn. You can see by not having any defenses up, it can be pretty nasty. Now here we're going to go ahead and move the cards along the row. We have this new card that's coming for the next turn, but the one we've been working on towards taking out in order to gain some Lament is now in this turn slot going into the next round. Up top, we're now moving into the spawning of minions. At this point in time, based on 2 players or 2 characters being used, we're going to be spawning 4 minions back into play, and there's numeric numbers all around the different environment tiles that'll tell you exactly where they're supposed to go. So we're spawning 4 minions. There are 8 numeric values on all of the tiles here. So basically you can have up to 8 minions in play with this scenario. Good thing we thinned the herds a little bit. We only have 1 minion left. So basically how this works is because we have 1 in play and we're bringing 4 out, we look for positions 2, 3, 4, and 5, and that's where they spawn. So the one that's in play covers the position number 1, which is actually hiding back here behind this monument. So we're not going to place anything there because we have 1 in play, but we're going to start spawning here, 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 and the 5th position right here. That's going to do it for spawning of minions, and that's going to also do it for the enemy phase. We head into the next round of play. We're in the evolution step. There's an important thing to note. At this point in time, again, the Technomancer, the full character, can choose to go ahead and place things in for Lament. And I want to because I can get myself to an unlock here, allowing me to get some kind of a benefit, whether it's an extra die if I choose, whatever die I want, or I can take 2 cards from the decks here and be able to bring something else into the equation for what I can potentially do. And with the Technomancer, they're going to actually connect to the bottom portion of these cards, empowering them and turning these gear symbols into something very useful. As the game goes on, you place more Lament in the corruption track. Yes, you will be powering yourself up over time, but once you hit 10, you are going to become fully corrupted. At that point, you're going to flip over this board that's placed in the center, and your character is going to become a corrupted version of itself, and some things are going to change. Something else that's very important to mention is as Lament is added to the corruption track, it's going to make that character more of a target when ties need to be broken. So if a boss, for instance, has to choose between more than 1 target during an activation, they're going to prioritize the hunter that has the highest level of corruption overall. And if 2 characters are tied for corruption, then in that case, players choose. When I resolve an evolution, which is going to happen for my Technomancer, I draw 2 cards from the evolution deck, and at this point I can either choose to gain one of the cards, of course placing it next to my player board, the other one would go to the bottom of the evolution deck, or I can gain any 1 die of my choice. Both cards shown were great, but this one is the one I'm eyeing. It's called Tesla Nodes. It's going to allow me to either spend on the left side of the bracket a double star, or I can spend these 2 in order to pull off this ability right here. You'll also notice this down below that says weapon bonus. This actually ties to the card I'm going to be actually connecting it to. So I've essentially upgraded my Tesla staff here with Tesla nodes, and it says right here, during this phase, when using this weapon actions, you may apply all of the weapon bonuses. So you can see if I go ahead and actually put that gear symbol die in here, I can get the ability to move 1 space when I'm actually making an attack. So as long as I have the gear die in here, then anytime I'm doing a weapon action, I'm going to get that ability to move, which is going to be very beneficial. I've also got this brand new thing I can use down here to deal damage. Moving on to the corruption step, we're going to go ahead and draw just for the Technomancer this time around, nothing for the Gunslinger, thanks to that effect that we read previously. We got ourselves a check for your corruption level and resolve the effect 2 to 8, which it's a 2 for the Technomancer, so it's actually going to land inside for the first time. Losing 2 corruption or heal 2, then gain 1 hunger. So now our damage on the Technomancer is only 4 damage against the 13 health I have, but I did gain Hunger as a status token, and it's one of those beginning of the Hunter's Phase type tokens. We're going to move X spaces towards the closest ally, then deal damage to each ally in range 0. X is the number of Hunger tokens that you have. That is how much movement you're going to be doing. So we're not only going to move X spaces, we're also going to deal X damage, all based on that hunger token. We have 1, and unfortunately our Gunslinger is 1 away. So all of a sudden the Technomancer has become a problem for the Gunslinger. The refresh step is underway. We're going to go ahead and roll our dice for the Technomancer. Going into the cleanse step, even though I rolled one of the symbols that is great for clearing out statuses, the unfortunate thing is hunger is the only one at the cleanse step that you cannot get rid of using one of these symbols. So unfortunately the hunger will stick around, which means it's going to trigger just before the hunter's turn, and then during the hunter's turn I would be able to go ahead and use this in this cleanse one right here on the board to get rid of hunger, but it's going to hit me at least once. So my hunter's going to move based on the 1 hunger token, 1 spaces towards the closest ally, then deal 1 damage to that ally at range 0. And of all the ways to lose that one health that I was hanging on to by the skin of my teeth with the gunslinger, it was the Technomancer himself that actually took out his own ally. Unfortunately, we have one of the critical injury tokens already on the gunslinger, so when we go ahead to resolve the secret card one once again, because we actually have that token on the board already, that hunter dies and the scenario is a failure. And that's very unfortunate because I was very close to eliminating the very first card from the boss here, the Hurricane Vortex. It had 3 damage on it, needed 4 more. The Gunslinger can do at least 2 damage with 1 hit and 1 damage with another. Technomancer allows us to do currently a number of different hits, so I would have been able to pull off that card removal or elimination, I should say, and that would have potentially swung things in a positive manner based on the Lament that would have given me, and I would have been able to boost up and upgrade yet again. But unfortunately, the hunger on the Technomancer actually caused my own friend to destroy his friend. Now, overall on the game board, we didn't get to interact with absolutely everything that's here. I mean, we still have a carriage over here. We have treasure tokens. 2 of them, we had a number of Lament tokens lying around, and a different space or 2 with environment-based effects. So I'm just going to go ahead and zoom in on a couple of those things, talk about them briefly at a high level to give an idea as to what they would do. The carriage token / miniature is an interesting one to interact with because when you do interact with it, you get a secret card, and there's actually a few of them, so you might interact with it and have a different outcome next time you have it on your scenario, which is kind of cool. So you're not going to expect the exact same thing every single time. There's variation even in the things that show up. Up top, there was a space called Corrupted Lands. We could discard a shield token and a dagger once per phase to heal 1. Then you can flip one of your double-sided weapon or armor cards. If you happen to have one of those, you can flip it over. That can give you an advantage. One of the cooler things that came out of the environment cards when we were setting up the scenario was this Witch's Hut, which we didn't get a chance to interact with, but I was very close to dabbling in. And this one here gives you the ability to discard a die to steal the witch's stuff, which sounds like it'd probably be a really cool thing to do to get something really unique or awesome. Maybe would make the witch mad, who knows? I'm going to assume yes. And then the other one is discarding of a die to speak with the witch to resolve another secret card, taking you down a different path. So there's different ways to interact with these. And of course, sometimes there's multiple of those secret cards. So you actually have multiple branching opportunities to go down different paths in the future. The other thing to note here is we have treasure tokens. I didn't get a chance to interact with them, but I did it on purpose because most of the treasure tokens, when you flip them over, they're all unique if memory serves. But when you flip them over, typically there's some type of healing going on in there, and healing from treasure can be huge in this one. Hence why I was hoping to lean on some of these treasure tokens in the upcoming round, which I didn't get to have because, well, my Technomancer decided to kill off his friend. But if I had gotten to this treasure, for instance, I could have flipped it over and it would have provided me one of these, either healing 4, gaining a specific blue die, or gaining 2 Lament. All of these sound great. Now, the reason one may not want to interact with treasure early in the game is because if it happens to be one that's very focused on healing only and you're at full health, you've basically just burnt a treasure token and got nothing for it. So typically I wait until I've got some damage before I interact with a treasure token to make sure that I want to take that healing if that option is present. And usually the healing option is there. So it's something to bank on when things are going south. And my gunslinger, really the damage started creeping up, and especially made this push to try to get the damage on the card. It really was maybe a bit too much, too fast. And that, my friends, wraps up my playthrough and my attempt at taking out the Convergence inside of Grimcoven from Awakened Realms, landing on GameFound for June 6th. The link for the campaign page is in the pinned comment video description, as well as on screen in the top right-hand corner. Rolling Solo community, let me know in the comments down below if you found this video informative and helpful in making a decision on the upcoming campaign. Also, I'm going to be looking in the comments and I'm going to be asking you guys right now, do you want to see a revenge play against the Convergence? Do you want to see me film another playthrough to see whether or not I can get a little bit further than I did this time around? If there's interest and I hear enough of it through the comment section, I will definitely dive into another play. Thank you guys so much for watching. Really hope this was helpful, and as always, keep on rolling solo.